Every time I show people this phone, they either ask me a question or get impressed by the thinness of the phone, which I believe is generally the two camps for this phone. There are people that are impressed that a phone can be this thin and quote-unquote light, while others, like myself, ask the question, why would you buy the iPhone Air? Hello everyone, this is Matt from Real World Review with the Apple Nike Lucid DJI iPhone Air. The MacBook, iPad, AirPods, and AirTags all got the Air name before the iPhone did. Finally. I guess the Vision Pro or iMac is next, even though the Silicon iMacs are technically Airs. Either way, let's get started. The first thing let's get out of the way is the design. One thing you'll notice for sure is that this is thin at 5.6 millimeters, but Apple's iPad Pro 13-inch is actually thinner at 5.1 millimeters. Sure, you have the camera island that is now a peninsula that makes the phone about the thickness of an iPhone 16 Pro, while the camera bump goes to the iPhone 16 Pro's island. But holding the phone is crazy thin, making me wonder how they figured this out until you use the phone. The frame is shiny titanium, something that annoyed me on the Apple Watch, and now does on the phone. That said, I haven't really noticed too many scratches in the 2 weeks of usage, so it's great to see, but I did notice some right before I returned this phone. More on that later. Most people still want a case, or not, because again, super thin. I personally picked the sky blue because I did not want to keep this phone, but I really could have picked any other color because I actually think the colors on this phone don't look that bad. Very iPhone 15 muted style, but still not that bad. But like I said, this is a titanium frame with the top housing nothing like a normal iPhone, besides the 17 Pros I guess. While the right side is where the side button is, as well as the camera button, which feels kind of out of place. While the left side is where the volume buttons and the action button is. No SIM tray on this phone, regardless of the country, just like millimeter wave. The bottom is where Apple brought back something that they haven't really done since the iPhone 11, or SE if you want to count that, and that is symmetry on the bottom of the phone, but not for good reason. These outside holes are where we have the dual microphones, then dual pentalobe screws, and then the USB-C 2.0 port. Yes, USB-C 2.0, but also no speaker. Instead, we move on to this custom display that feels like an iPhone 16 Plus but isn't, and you'll see the little cutout on the top for the only speaker on the phone, something Apple has never done, and the last phone that they had one loudspeaker on was the iPhone 6s or SE 2016, depending on how you look at it. As for the sound, there's no stereo feel, Apple doesn't create magic, and the sound is good enough but not great for horizontal content, and sadly perfect for TikToks and YouTube shorts. Just lacks bass and makes the iPhone 12 mini sound amazing. As for the screen though, this is a slightly anti-reflective screen with a 6.5-inch 120Hz 1260p display, and honestly one of the highlights of the phone. The ProMotion display goes up from 1000 nits to 1600 nits of HDR and up to 3000 nits of outdoor brightness, or a little under 800 nits with manual brightness on. Definitely not the brightest screen, but pretty great, and the image it produces is spectacular. I would have preferred a smaller screen though, as I'm not really a fan of big screens anymore. Could you imagine an iPhone Mini Air? The bezels are pretty minimal, and we do still get Notch Island on here, which the latter is kind of gimmicky, but I kind of like it, as well as the always on display, which I do not like. It gets updated literally once a year, and by that I mean they add a single button and that's it. Seriously, there's 3 toggles now, and that's it after 3 years on a phone. We have the Face ID cameras in this notch that Apple always neglects to update, but the camera did get an update. More on that later. On the back of the phone, we get a simple Apple logo with frosted glass, while the top portion is where the second camera is, and it seems the flash and microphone don't like it because they're super far away now. This is ceramic shield, while the front has ceramic shield too, but don't worry, you'll still be able to break those. Like I said, this is a fairly tall phone at 6.15 inches tall, and the width is 2.94 inches, which I feel isn't great to me because I want something that's thin but not wide. Weight-wise, this is 165 grams, which is pretty great. The thicker, taller, wider, bigger battery and extra camera S25 Edge is 2 grams lighter, but nice. This is IP68 dust and water resistant for now, and features Wi-Fi 7, Bluetooth 6, 5G of course, 4 GSM bands, second generation ultra-wideband chip for location, and one type of subscriber identity module, which is the eSIM worldwide. Sorry, I couldn't think of anything network related for 3. Could have been USB 3.0, but nope, only 2.0 speeds. When we move into the phone, it's kind of insane to think that Apple shoved the board all the way to the top. That said, they did this kind of with the iPhone 11 Pro, and there's only one camera on the back here, so not too surprising anymore, I guess. That said, we do get the Apple A19 Pro to power this phone with 5 GPU cores instead of 6 that come in the Pros, but ultimately better performance in the iPhone 16 Pro for so long, as the phone will clearly get pretty warm with heavy usage, of course mainly at the top area where the only speaker is. I played Death Stranding on this for 4 minutes and the screen already dimmed, and I thought, wow, this phone is a joke. Then I tried playing it on the iPhone 16 Pro, and the resolution looked a little bit better and the frame rate even smoother, so again, the Air is a joke. However, I continued playing this for that same 4 minutes, and the 16 Pro got warm and started to dim the screen as well. So essentially similar heat profile, but in some cases worse performance, but maybe artificially? So sure, less GPU, but this is still better than pretty much any iPhone performance-wise, whether we're talking about CPU or GPU, of course, except for the 17 Pros. You get hardware, ray tracing, and blah blah blah. It's really simple. Anything iPhone 13 Pro and newer is going to be solid performance-wise, and this is no difference. Of course, iOS 26 isn't perfect, and this phone does not break that tradition, as it is still a buggy mess at times, but at the same time, it's still an iPhone, and by that I mean it just works. We get 12 gigabytes of RAM in here for some reason, maybe when Apple Intelligence is worth talking about in 2027, then the extra RAM will be great. I'm not going to talk about it simply because there's not really much that has changed other than priority notifications being pointless and getting highlighted whenever someone sends you a date or time, whether it's an important thing or not. It's like Apple's reading the words to you but not understanding what you're saying. Now, of course, you're wondering what everyone else is wondering. How well does that 3,149 milliamp or 12.26 watt hour battery perform? Well, compared to the iPhone 16 Pro's 3,582 milliamp or 13.94 watt hour cell or 12.1% larger battery, this is what I'm seeing. Less than a 10% difference, and sometimes even better battery life. Of course, I will have to say without a doubt that the 16 Pro clearly is a better phone for battery life, but this is not the charge your phone every 10 minutes that everyone thought that it was going to be. Worse than all 17 series, sure, but not by much. Apple heavily talking about the extra battery case made everyone think that the battery was going to be trash, which I personally believed is a reasonable assumption, but it truly isn't any miserable than any other phone that has a 3,149 milliamp or similar cell. Let me remind you that the iPhone 14 Pro has a 3,200 milliamp cell, but also the last big phone with a smaller battery was the iPhone 8 Plus. The iPhone XS Max had a 3,174 milliamp cell, so pretty close. As for charging, we do get 20 watts of wired and 20 watts of wireless MagSafe charging, which is kind of weird because apparently the 17 can go up to 40 watts wired and 25 watts of MagSafe. That said, I charged my phone overnight and I would need 7 hours of screen on time to kill this battery, so it's really a non-issue for me, and I am a person that does full brightness all the time with the highest resolution, but I will say I did not turn on the always on display because, like I said, trash. As for the cameras, essentially the iPhone 17 without the ultra-wide, which sounds better than saying this phone only has one camera, which isn't really true because of the front camera. Now, the front camera is confusing, but I kind of get it. So it is a 24 megapixel focusable sensor because it is a square sensor, kind of. That said, it does give you access to 18 megapixels at a time because it uses the camera to crop in, which is cool, but the operation is strange. Open the camera up in vertical normal mode and it gets confusing. It auto zooms and rotates depending on the people that you see in the shot, which is great, I guess. But again, zoomed in shot, so click the button on the left, center stage off, which, okay, it wasn't tracking my face anyway. Then, to rotate, click the horizontal shot. This is the same as turning sideways, pretty cool. But then you turn the phone sideways by habit and it zooms out, but technically it's the same shot. You're probably just not framing the same. Rotate back and now it's zoomed in on your face. What they don't really tell you is that unless you want to be off center easily, you never really need to rotate this phone. It's a weird thing because you need to break that habit because you're really just wasting your time. Then of course we get all the good stuff like auto portrait, center stage for photos and videos, though I never really saw it happen on the former, as well as ultra stabilized video, which I don't see it. Maybe it's happening before the shot that I'm showing you now, but I don't see it. Do you? Note that just like normal iPhones, this is shot at 4K 60 frames per second. That was a little over 255 words about a single camera, and now let's talk about the rear camera. Unlike the terrible camera on the iPhone 16e, this seems to be exactly the same as the camera on the iPhone 17, the 48 megapixel sensor shift stabilized camera that allows for 12, 24, and 48 megapixel shots, as well as a 2x optical zoom that allows for another 12 megapixels. Just like the front, this captures 4K 60 frames per second video, no 8K video this year, as well as a crazy cropped 2.8K video for action mode. I don't really get why we don't get 4K action mode when the camera sensor is higher than what 8K needs, but okay. It's strange because while it's not the same camera as the 17 Pro or even past Pros, we do have a Pro chip in here. So where's ProRes video, log recording, external recording, carries a Pro price and 256 gigabyte stock, but nothing like that. Apparently, the 256 gigabyte model even gets a faster chip than the regular Pros and 17. But going back to the photos, as always, there's not much missing on this camera, but I will say that low light wasn't great in my test, and zooming beyond 2x is just not that great. It doesn't feel like there's any AI drawing to the image, but still, a little sharpening to try and make the image look good far away would have been nice. But I will let you be the judge, so enjoy. It seems like this section is going to be longer than the last section, which is kind of wild to me and probably to you simply because there's only 2 cameras on this phone. They're great cameras and the Ultra will not be missed, use the front camera for that. But having a 3x optical crop would have been nice if they went with a 108 megapixel sensor just to get that 3x 12 megapixel equivalent length. Now the problem I have with this phone is ironically the size. Motorola made a phone that was 5.2 millimeters thin for whatever reason. I don't have the Moto Z here, but I do have the Moto Z2 Force, which was 6.1 millimeters thin and still feels really similar. It too has a small battery, big camera bump, and also 1 speaker. Then we have the 5.8 millimeter Google Pixel Fold, which is thicker, but again, the Pixel 9 Fold is thinner at 5.1 millimeters. This is kind of cheating because yes, it's heavier and a larger phone because it is folding, but this is the real contender. The Samsung S25 Edge is 5.8 millimeters thin and very similar in weight and size, but that extra 0.16 millimeters makes a massive difference. We get almost 20% larger battery, not only a 200 megapixel camera, but another 12 megapixel ultra wide camera, but we also get a second speaker on the bottom. There's so much that gets put into this phone simply because it's a little bit thicker. And the funny thing is the thickest part of the iPhone Air is actually thicker than the S25 Edge. And the price? $1,000 plus for the iPhone Air, while the S25 Edge is $700, but normally sits at about $900 or less on Amazon. That said, this does start at $1,099 US, which is not great, but does offer some benefits over the Air. Regardless, I don't believe the $1,000 price tag is worth what the Air gives you. And that's my review of the iPhone Air, the phone that is just too thin. But what do you think? I probably already know, but sound off in the comments, join the 1%, and as always, thanks for watching.